What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? I would call it creepy more than scary. But my mom's friend had a small house and lived alone. She noticed weird things. A batch of soup depleting faster than usual. Missing eggs. Damp towels in the hamper when she hadn't used any. Extra dishes in the dishwasher. Etc. This went on for months. She thought she was just being forgetful. One day she heard some thumping around in her attic and went to investigate. She found some makeshift living quarters. Small radio. Hot plate. Sleeping bag. Pillow. Food wrappers. Etc. She called the cops who came to keep an eye on the place. They ended up catching a homeless man climbing a tree, trying to sneak into her attic window. He had been doing this almost daily. He would wait for her to go to work, then go downstairs and help himself to food and amenities. The funny part about this story is they got to know each other throughout the ordeal. And the guy was actually very respectful. Just down on his luck. She didn't press charges. Instead, let him move in. Helped him get a job. And he lived in the attic until he got back on his feet. Creepy speep with a happy ending. My mom was driving. And a guy ran out in the road. So she stopped so she couldn't hit him. It was night time. So it was pretty dark out. And 3 other men emerged from the forest around. All trying to use the door handles of her car to get in. She locked them luckily. And gassed it to the nearest town. Remember to always lock your car after you start it. Because if it wasn't unlocked, who knows what would have happened to her. Probably one of the many reasons newer cars auto-lock their doors once you go over 15 miles per hour. Neshaber train disaster is something that reminds me how death can come at any moment. A train with 51 wagons of sulfur, fertilizer, petrol and cotton wool somehow broke loose and rolled down the track about 20 kilometers until it derailed in the town of Qayyum, Iran. There were no humans on board. Chemical leaks ensued and authorities tried to extinguish whatever fires broke out. At one point, the whole thing explodes. And it really explodes. The whole town of Qayyum is literally demolished. 3 nearby towns are badly damaged and it was heard 70 kilometers away. The wreckage continued to explode for several days after. Around 300 people died and more than that injured. An earthquake of 3.6 on Richter scale was produced. The 1904 Cincinnati Privy disaster. In 1904, 9 schoolgirls drowned in an outhouse after the floor collapsed. They literally drowned in human waste. This is the second post in this thread that features Cincinnati. For such an inconspicuous little Midwestern city, it does have a colorful history. My friend's boss bought an Audi A4 convertible. Back when they were new and interesting. One of the talking points was the pop-up roll hoops that were hidden unless you rolled it. A few months after buying it, he got to test those roll hoops out. As he lost control and skidded down a steep bank about 10 meters 35 feet deep. The roll hoops did their job. And he survived with just cuts and scratches from the bushes he'd plowed through. The car ended up the right way up and he got out. Walked back up the bank to the side of the road. Then got on the phone to the police to report the accident. While he was standing there, a driver from a car that had seen the accident came over to speak to him. Approaching from behind, the other driver asked if he was okay. My friend's boss turned around to reply and dropped dead. His neck had been fractured. But was in one piece right up until he turned his head. When it severed his spinal cord. Not as scary as some of the stories here. But I was pretty horrified when my dad told me the story. There are some really big houses in the woods in my hometown. One of the owners went out drinking with his buddies and realized he forgot the key to the gate when he got home. So he decided to just climb the gate. While climbing in his drunken state, he slips and his leg gets pierced by one of the spikes on the gate. He was hanging there but too afraid to call for his wife. Since he was sure she would just open the automatic gate from inside the house, and since it was one of those gates that slides to the side, it would just rip his leg off if she did. He was hanging there the entire night until his wife woke up, saw him and called the fire department. My dad, who is one of the firefighters that showed up, said they had to saw off the spike to get him off. Just imagine hanging from your own gate all night not being able to call for help. Artemis Pyle, the drummer from Lynyrd Skynyrd, survived a plane crash and walked to a nearby house only to be shot by the homeowner. The homeowner saw a bloody long-haired man and winged him. Pyle survived that as well and made a full recovery. Ed Kemper murdered college women because his mother worked at a college and he claims he wanted to destroy everything she loved. Then, he murdered his mother and decapitated her. Raped her head and her body. Set her head on a shelf and screamed at it for hours. That is the part that terrifies me. Then he murdered her best friend and turned himself in. Relaying the whole story in detail. Crying. Undefined. Freaks me the hell out. Edit 111 days later. I'm still getting comments on this, so I'll add another thing that makes him creepy. He would bury the heads of the women he killed in his mother's backyard. He lived with her. He angled the head to where they were pointed upward facing his mother's bedroom window. He would later say he did this purposely because his mother always wanted to be looked up to. The driver, one of the semis we took in on trade, died in the truck. The sleeping area is a bunk with a mattress that can be flipped up, and under it is a seat and a table. So during the day it's a dinette setup. And at night, you pull a lever and pull the bunk down to sleep. Well, something happened and the bunk flipped up while the driver was sleeping and it pinned him against the wall. He couldn't get it to drop back down and suffocated. He was stuck there for somewhere around 12 hours. Someone had noticed that he was parked for an unusually long amount of time for the kind of deliveries he did. The company that built the sleeper did something to the bunk so that couldn't happen again, and supposedly recalled all of that sleeper style. When my aunt was about 16, she was working at a grocery store and had a boss in his mid-20s. One day he called the house and was begging her to sneak out and hang out with him. She was considering it because it was her boss and she didn't want to say no. My mom, who is 2 years younger than her, always gets these incredibly spot-on gut feelings. She had one that night and begged my aunt not to go out with him. Thankfully she listened to my mom and told him no, which made him really angry. He ended up going out that night and meeting another girl. He took her out to some cliffs and raped her and pushed her off. Somehow she lived through this and was able to get him sent to prison. I feel so sorry for that girl and so thankful for my mom and her gut feelings. Always trust your gut. This is from South Africa. The woman is called Alison Boda and she was abducted, raped and then choked until she blacked out. She was driven into a secluded area, stabbed 30 times in the abdomen and 16 times in the throat and left for dead on the side of the road. She had to use her shirt to keep her organs inside her body and hold her head up because of a damaged muscle in her neck, and proceeded to crawl to the road where she was eventually spotted and rescued. She survived the attack and now does motivational speaking, I believe. And here is a link to the IMDb page for the documentary. I worked for U-Haul when I was 18 and it was located in front of a club that was known for being really sketchy. I came in to open one morning and it was common for people to knock on the door hoping to get in early and get their truck. On this day, I hear frantic knocking on the door. I'm there alone still, so it kind of startled me. I look and there's a woman, completely naked, covered in what looks like blood. I called the cops and grabbed one of the moving blankets and went outside to cover her up. She smelled really bad and was a mess. Ended up being blood and her own speep she was covered in. Found out later she was drugged at the club that night/early morning. Raped and left blacked out in the alley. It was just a peeped up and surreal situation to be involved in. What a nightmare. I'm glad you could help. You know you're in a bad situation when you're just looking to the nearest human being for help.